Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tell Not Show. As always, I am your host, Julia J.K. Allen. Unfortunately, Kirsha won't be able to join us today as she's still feeling under the weather. I am an author and editor, and I like to write fantasy and horror stories with a little bit of magic sprinkled into everything. Very excited to welcome our guest tonight. We have J.L. Hill, who is a native New Yorker from the South Bronx, Fort Apache, in the turbulent 60s. He earned a degree in computer programming, his other love. He is a multi-genre author. His experiences seasoned his novels and the worlds he imagined. James started Rock Hill Publishing LLC to publish his own work and give others access to the literary world. The four-part adult urban crime series, the Killer series, is complete. He is currently working on a three-part historical fantasy, the Gemstone series, and we're very excited to welcome him. So welcome! Yay!
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It is freezing, but I'm surviving. Um,
Okay, where are you at?
I
Because it's freezing here too.
yeah, I'm in Michigan, so
Oh, it's really freezing here.
yeah, it's pretty cold. How about you? Where are you hailing from?
Virginia Beach.
Oh, okay.
But don't
So
let the
beach
name
is
fool you.
usually nice, right? So I wanted to start off our conversation with asking you about your writer's journey. So what got you started with writing? What kind of sparked that passion, and how has the journey gone for you so far?
Well, what I got started writing was way back when I used to write. I used to read the comics, the Marvels, because I love Marvel comics, and I would uh, try to guess what the next story in the comic was going to be because Marvel wrote series, and back when I was a kid, and this is going way back, they were like 10 cents a comic, and so you had to wait till the next month before the next one in the story, and of course we would buy multiple comics. So you buy the Fantastic Four, you buy X-Men, you buy Spider-Man, you buy all the
Right.
different comics, and then everybody had stories that ran through them, and I would sit there, me and my friend would trace out the characters, and I'd sit there and try to write the next story that was coming up, trying to think of where the story going to, and that's what
Yeah.
really sparked me as a writer. And then people told me I wrote pretty good, and I had great ideas and all that kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
I kept it going. Never really lost the love for it.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Can you imagine the wait, right? That anticipation. Like if you had to do that still to this day of waiting like a month for the next episode to release on a TV show or every week, like it's binging has become so prevalent that like whenever a show is new and I'm like I have to wait a week, I'm just like, what is
Yeah.
this?
Yes,
I
I'm mad at some of the shows that come out and they don't let you binge watch them because they are going to
right.
put them out one a week at a time. My grandson got me into that. He was into watching an entire series in like 2 or 3
Right.
days, and I have to sit
Yeah.
there with him and watch them. And then I got hooked on doing that. I was like, okay, I'm not going to watch
Right.
it now. I'll wait for the whole series to come out, and I'll just sit there and watch the whole thing at once.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like patience was already an issue with me, but like nowadays I feel like, oh my gosh, if I have to practice patience, I'm just like, ah. But I love that story of like you consuming these comic books and then just trying to guess like what would be a great story to happen next. Like that is like such a great use of imagination. Um, so tell me a little bit about the genres you write and why you choose those genres.
Okay, I started off in science fiction.
Okay.
Of course, coming out of a Marvel world, you're
Mhm.
gonna be very into science fiction. I was into chemistry, physics, all that kind of stuff, kind of nerdy. So science fiction was my thing, and so I started writing uh, science fiction that happens in the near future mostly. I don't
Right.
like. I love Star Trek and things like that, but they jump so far ahead in the future that you can do anything, right? But
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
if you focus on the next 50 to 100 years, you look back 100 years and you say, okay, what was life like 100 years ago? Everything was horse
Right.
driven, everything was mechanical. You know, they just started with electricity. So you look ahead 100 years, and where
Mhm.
will that be? Now everything's computerized, and you're going to have different type of energy, different type of mechanics, that kind of
Right.
thing. And so that's what I kind of like in the science fiction world. And of course, the sociology of it. How have people changed? We went from being kings and queens and empires to being somewhat democracy, somewhat
Right.
authoritarian, but not ruled by the blood. Not, this guy's son is going to then be in charge. And that, no, now we're like, no,
Yeah.
no, no, we're not going for that. This guy is taking over, and then somebody else is taking over from him, and you know,
Right. Right.
it, and then I started writing fantasy because I don't mix science fiction and fantasy. I like my science fiction as science fiction. I like my fantasies as fantasies.
Okay. Yeah, fair
And
enough.
yes, and it's a big difference when you think about it, because in fantasy, in science fiction, let me go the other way. In
Right.
science fiction, you have to follow rules. Things have to work. And you just can't jump in and say, well, this happened because they got power. They got magic.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
if you're gonna have magic, or powers, you're gonna have to explain where those powers come from in science.
Right.
In fantasies, it's just there. It's just part of the world. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like it becomes it's become part of a overall thing that, like take Star Wars for example. Lots of science fiction in Star Wars, but then you get to that one drawback about the Force,
Oh, okay.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and that kind of like controls everything because he wasn't a Jedi. He couldn't have been a Jedi until he was able to build a lightsaber, you know,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
all these other things that is just part of their natural world, and they never really explain where the force came from. Even through the whole thing, you never
Mhm.
really know exactly where the force comes from because the metachlorians and all that kind of stuff. They still never said what that was. You know,
Right, right.
so I moved into fantasy, and then I just recently did a short story for a horror anthology because I also like horror. And
Yeah.
I'm working on a horror novel now because I finally got my horror blood going. And I
Oh,
wrote a
very
couple of
nice.
short stories, and then I finally got a horror. I'm working on a horror story now.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. I love writing horror myself. I was kind of dared to do it because I thought that's the one genre I could never do well because I am a little bit of a chicken, right? But it was so fun to think about, like to break it down and be like, what scares me and why, and how can I put that into a story to scare someone else? Like, what would scare other people? And just like that thought experiment was so fun to do that I like really enjoy it now.
I also write crime novels, so my horror
Oh,
stories
yeah.
are somewhat akin to how I because I figure crime novels are somewhat like a horror story.
Yes.
You get murder, you get these very bad people, right?
Right, right,
And that's somewhat of what a horror story is. You know,
right.
murder, really bad people. Sometimes
Yeah,
it's supernatural. Sometimes it's just some twisted person. Mentally.
yeah, yeah.
So
No, my favorite monster is the human as a monster. Because that can be truly chilling, right? When you get
yes.
down to like, yeah, just people doing bad things that can be really, really jarring. Um, what? So you obviously write a lot. You have a lot of different genres that you dabble in, which is amazing. What does your writing process look like? Like, how do you go from idea to then finished story?
When I get an idea, I usually get a main theme of an idea or a main story of an idea, storyline. And
Hmm.
then from that, I flush it out in a synopsis. I write a couple of page synopsis, which will take me through the story, how I want the story to flow. I'm a
Okay.
pantser. So, I sit down
Yeah.
and I write. No, I'm a plotter. Sorry, the other way
Oh,
around.
okay.
I'm a plotter. I sit down and I come up with the entire story, the synopsis. I pick out all my major characters that I know are going to be in the story, place them in where they should go,
Right.
and I kind of like plot the whole thing out before I start writing. I usually start from the end. When
Okay.
I come up with an idea, I come up with an idea for the end of a story before I ever come up with the beginning. So I come
Mhm.
up with the end and how I want the story, how the story is going to wind up. What the story going to be like, and what the end is going to be. And then
Mhm.
from that, I write to that end. So then I go back to, well, what would have kicked that off? What would happen to have made that happen? And then I go
Right.
back to that point and I work my way towards the end. So I always have the end in mind. I always have
Yes.
that vision of what the story is going to be. And then I write to that end and try to get there.
Say I agree with you 100% that knowing the ending is so helpful. I used to be like a diehard pantser, like would fight anyone to tell me like do it another way. And the problem is like that works really well for some people, but I never finished anything, right? Because I would like get to like chapter 13 and then like the words would kind of fizzle away because I didn't know what was going to happen next, let alone the end of the story. And so like I had all of these like great starts to novels, but like nothing ever finished. Like even short stories were kind of hard for me to finish. And so I really had to like reevaluate my writing process and be like, okay, we got to try something else because this is not working for me, right? Because I
Yeah.
would just be like, what's happening next? I have no idea, right? So for me, knowing like what I'm setting down to do, like knowing a goal, like really helps me to begin writing and not get that writer's block and get stuck. And especially knowing the ending, because then I can kind of discover my way there. But like if I know the ending, then I can keep going forward.
Yeah. And that helps. I mean, I started doing nano write mode a couple of years ago,
Yeah, yeah,
and that taught me a new way to write because I used to write a couple of chapters, go back, read them, do a little
right,
editing, done, do the next couple of chapters, go back. So I would go back and forth, back and forth. It
right,
kept me on track, but it took a long time. Then you do nano, and you have to write the whole thing in 1 month.
right, yeah,
50,000 words, and it's like, oh, no going back, no going back. Just keep
right,
going.
right,
And if you lose your way, you'll find it again. Don't worry about it. And
right,
some of these
right,
things in Nano, they take that wild turn to the left. The characters decide
right.
to grab the wheel and you're going left now, and it's like, oh God, how am I going to get back on track?
Right. That's the fun part of the writing process, I feel like, is when your characters start doing something you're like, "Oh, I didn't account for this." Like
Yeah.
that can be really fun though. Yeah, no, I agree. I always as an editor, I recommend to people to not edit people like as they're writing because like I feel like being creative is about getting like generating as many ideas and just like playing and experimenting and trying things out, whereas being editing is more analytical. You want to like criticize and judge your ideas and pick the best one and like do all that stuff. And for me, it's very hard to switch back and forth, right? And so I always say like create when you need to create, just get that creativity going and like build that momentum and just keep going. Because when you switch to that analytical, more critical mind, you're going to kind of squash the creativity a little bit to make the editing work. So I always say like I never try to edit while I go because I just want to keep creating and being creative. Yeah.
My favorite saying is by Hemingway. He said,
Yeah.
"Write drunk, edit sober."
Right. Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty good. To just be creative when you're trying to get a story and you're trying to write
Right.
a story. Just let it go, and that's what Nano taught me. Just let it go. Just
Yeah,
write it.
yeah. There's some freedom and fun in that process
Yeah.
as well. What do you think is the most important part of writing for you?
Hmm. Uh, Most important part.
Yeah, like
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say it could be like an aspect of writing, or it could be an aspect of the writing process, or it could just be something that you think is really important for you to figure out for your story.
I think getting started.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think the most important part or thing to do about writing is actually getting started because a lot of time you got a lot of
Yeah.
ideas and you know things are just spinning around and, oh, this is going to be great, this is going to be great, but you just don't sit down and do it. And
Yes.
that's the most important part, is at some point pull the trigger and write the story. you know
Right. No, I agree. There's a lot of kind of daydreaming and thinking about the story that happens, but you have to actually sit down and get it on
Yeah.
paper at some
And unfortunately, like
point.
I said, I'm a planner, so a plotter. So I
Yeah,
sit there and I
yeah.
think a whole lot about the story before I ever get around to writing anything. And
Right.
sometimes it takes a year or two, just thinking about a story and all the
Yeah.
different things. And, it's like, all right, later. I'll think about this one a little bit. And you just don't get started until, you
Right,
say one
right.
day, you know what? I'm going to start writing that story now.
Yeah. Is there like, do you find there's like certain things in the process of thinking about it that lets you know that you're ready to start writing it, or?
Yeah, yeah. When the idea really hits, like I
Yeah.
said, I started writing for Nano. I started writing a horror story because I wrote a short story. Someone asked me, group of people wanted me to add to this anthology and everything. So they asked me if I
Yeah.
would write one, and I said, yeah, okay, I can write a short story. I wrote a couple of short stories that was in like the horror vein. So I said, yeah, I
Right.
can write a short story. And so I wrote the short story, and then I was like, I really wanted to write a horror novel for a long time,
Right.
and I just could
Mhm.
not think of a good idea for one. And then it came to me with this idea of witchcraft and vampires and
Yeah.
something in the 1800s, because
Wow.
that's when all your good vampire stories are,
Right.
the real good ones are in the 1800s, and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
this idea of um how would you say it, domestic violence that
Okay.
leads, so it's sort of like this not normal but normalized world because
Mhm.
the way women were treated and
Right.
second class citizens, and so you wind up with this guy who turns out to be really evil, and then
Mm.
because of his evilness he spawns a vampire. So,
Oh, okay.
so it had
Yeah.
nothing to do with religion or anything like that. You know,
Right.
it becomes witchcraft, druid magic and different types of magic from around the world, and it spawned this. It winds up being this story about a vampire at the very end. That
That is fascinating. I love that that idea that magic is what created, and it's not necessarily like, I really like to play around with things where we take like mythology or legends from our real world and explain it in a different way in the story world where it makes sense. So I really like playing around with vampire mythology and like what, the mythos of the vampire, like what a vampire is.
yeah,
It's really fascinating, but I love that idea that like it comes from magic, that the vampire was created through this like druidic magic. That's fascinating. That's a great idea. Yeah.
yeah. So it's those ideas. Like I said, sometimes they kick around for a long time. Sometimes they just come to
Right.
me, and it's like, wow, this is it. This is the story I should write, and then I, just sit down and start going at it.
Yeah, no, those what ifs are so magical. Like, what if, like, how was a vampire created, and all of
Yeah,
that stuff can really be great fodder for stories. Um, do you think personally, this can be as an author or as a reader, do you think characters or plot is more important for a story?
I would say character,
Okay.
because people actually have to like or hate your characters. The story could be anything, and a real good story plot is important to the story because it moves it along. But
Right.
you really have to have strong people, because people,
Yeah.
that's what people are drawn to. They're drawn to the character. You know, uh, a war story is a war story.
Mhm.
A love story is a love story, but it's the people involved in the story that gets people interested and that hold their attention.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so basically, you really need good character. I mean, a good story is a good story.
Right.
You do need to put them in a situation, and a world. World building becomes a very
Right.
big part of it. You know, but it's still centered around the people of
I would
all the
agree.
characters, not necessarily people, but the characters.
Right. No, I would agree. I think that like ideal world we have both, right? Happily meeting together, but like for me it's all about characters. Like even as a reader, like the characters are what I fall in love with, and I can forgive kind of like a not as exciting plot because I love the characters and I love exploring them and what they're doing and like their relationships. But yeah, so for me characters are super important.
And I like writing characters and leaving some of it vague so that the reader
Yeah.
can fill in their own vision of what this character is like.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
I don't like it where you completely give me everything about a character so I have nothing to imagine. You know, I
Right,
want to leave
right.
stuff to the imagination, let people fill in their own ideas and what makes a person tick and things like that, where they were like, well, yeah, that's one way, but you know, I think there's
Right.
something else that this guy is going through, or this, you know, or this
Right.
thing is going through, you know. So it becomes that idea of yes, I want to give you the idea. I want to give you a person or a character that you can see, relate
Mhm.
to, but I want to leave it. I want to leave something for you to put into it yourself as a reader.
Yeah. A really great quote is imagination begins with the writer but ends with the reader. And I think that
Yeah,
perfectly is exactly what you're saying that I always hate like when people describe characters and they talk about like every little feature like it's I like to get a picture of the character where it's like what eye color, what hair color, skin color, what do they look
yeah,
like in general. But when you start describing like their nose shape and their mouth and you get like too overwrought with the details, then it kind of like it loses some of the shine for me.
yes,
And I also what I love to do as a writer is kind of give hints of their personality when I'm describing what they look like. So I have a character who has like a beauty mark and they cover it up because they have this idea like of perfection, right? They want to be perfect. And so they
right.
cover up a beauty mark, but that like tells you something about their personality, not just that, oh, she has a beauty mark, right? So we get a little personality mixed in with our description.
Oh yes, yes. That's absolutely the way to do it. You know, you got to let
Yeah.
not only the physical, but you got to let the inside, the mental, come through sometime through
Right,
how they look
right.
at themselves. Like they say one time, I forget who, but somebody one time said, "Don't give me the mirror view of somebody. I don't want
Mhm.
someone. I don't want you to sit there and describe what you see in the mirror. You know,
Oh
as
yeah.
a characterization. So like
Yeah, yeah.
hair color, eye color, this, that, and just give me a physical picture of somebody. You know,
Right,
let me
right.
see what they see in themselves. You know, that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No, that's very
absolutely.
well put. Yeah, that's amazing. Um, I love to ask this next question. Do you have a favorite author and what do you think they do well?
Well, my favorite author, I have a couple, but my favorite
Yes.
author is Stephen King.
Okay, yeah.
And the thing that Stephen King does well is scare the hell out of people.
Right, right. Oh my
I
gosh,
mean,
yeah.
when I said I wanted to be a horror writer, it's because of Stephen King. Now, I
Yeah.
also love Edgar Allan Poe
Yes.
as a writer, but you know, because the way he crafts his words are just beautiful. Yeah. Uh, Dark
Right. Talk
and broody, but beautiful. But
right.
Stephen King is a scary person. His
I
ideas are
know.
just so scary.
I often wonder what his mind is really like because the places he goes is amazing, and he's really great at capturing like the essence of a character. I feel like I
Yes.
discovered him in middle school, which I had a big horror jag in middle school with reading, which maybe wasn't the best age, but with Goosebumps and everything that was out, I just really loved it. Um, but he's also like such a prolific writer. He writes every day and gets novels out, novel
I
after
just
novel
wish
after
I could do
novel.
that, but I'm not like that. And yes, he
No,
does.
he's
He says
built
he goes in.
different. Yeah.
He got an office. He goes in his office and he sits down and he writes for how many hours he
Right.
puts in. And I mean, I wish I
Yeah.
could. I wish I had that
Yeah.
kind of discipline. I don't.
Yeah. Well, yes, and I think it's partly was spurred by his bad accident, right? That kind of like he realized like if I want to finish these stories, I got to get on it. But yes, built
I have a
different.
book
I
by
feel
him
like.
right now that
Yeah.
I'm just starting to read called Stephen King on writing.
Yes. Yes.
It's one of the nonfiction books that he wrote about
Mhm.
the art of writing and the craft of writing, and so I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
started it. Yeah, and I'm gonna.
Yeah. I enjoyed reading it. It's a really interesting insight into his like writing process and all of that. I didn't love it as much as some other writing books though, just because he is a pantser and he really like talks about pantsing a lot, and I'm like, doesn't work for me that way. I don't have that Stephen King magic with pantsing.
Yeah, but see, you
Um,
have to have a little bit of both. You know, when you're a writer,
right.
you're actually a little bit of both because you can plot out everything, and I plot everything out, and then I
Yeah.
start writing, and then things just start working their way in, and
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you're flying at the keyboard, and
Yeah.
that's when you
Yeah.
go left and right and all that kind of stuff, and you get characters that come in. It's like, oh wow, I didn't think about that. That wasn't in
Yeah.
the plan.
Yeah, no, no, I totally agree. I think that a lot of people kind of look down at plotting because they're like, "Oh, my characters always do something different, or I come up with a better idea." But like I always tell people, like, you're not married to your plot, right? Like, if you have it outlined, you don't have to go before a judge and get it annulled or anything to change the plot. Like, just update your outline, like it's
Oh, I
fine.
update my outline a lot. And
Yes,
sometimes I
yes,
throw it
yes.
away. Sometimes I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't work anymore. We'll just forget the
Right,
outline
right.
and go.
Yeah,
From
yeah,
here on
yeah.
in, we're flying by the seat of our pants. It's okay.
Yeah. No, I like I said, to have goals when I sit down to write, is being like, this is what I want to do in this chapter, develop the relationship between these two characters, or foreshadow, introduce a plot device,
Oh, my
anything like
outlines
that.
are by chapter. I have an
Yeah.
overall outline. I have an outline by chapter. Writing
Yeah.
nano, I put the chapter outlines at the very beginning of the chapter, so
Yes,
I can just
same.
look back and remember. Oh, wait a second, I got to get this into the story. This,
Right.
yeah. So I have a paragraph or so that tell me what that chapter is going to cover.
Yes,
That
I
that
like
way
to
I
do
can,
that
yeah.
too. The scary part though is I'm always afraid I'm gonna leave my notes in the story when I'm done and I finish editing. I'm just like, oh, did I take that chapter note out? I don't know.
Oh, I take it out. Don't worry, I get it out because
Yeah, yeah.
it's the first paragraph of that chapter,
Right,
so I
right.
know that got to come. Yeah,
I'm always super worried that I'm gonna forget it one of these times.
and now I
But
put it in
yeah.
color. So yes, I have
Yeah,
to, I have
yes.
I have changed the color on the font when I first, so I don't miss it because sometimes
Right.
I'm
That's
reading
a
back
good,
and
yeah.
I can't remember what I wrote and I'm looking through it. But that doesn't make sense,
Right,
And then you realize,
right.
oh yeah, that doesn't belong there. That's just the
Right.
chapter note. Yeah, get rid of
No,
it.
I should definitely color code it, because like I'll leave little notes myself, like conversation about this, or remember to develop this. And then like I said, when you're going through reading through it for the hundredth time, like sometimes you just miss those notes to yourself. So color
Yeah,
coding is smart.
yeah, I do
Um
that in the middle of the chapter too when I can't really come up
yeah,
with the idea, and I'm like, well,
right.
okay, in here we're gonna have to do something.
Right. Or
Yeah, something
conversation
needs to
about
happen
this.
here.
Yeah.
Yes, and then I move on.
Yes.
Okay,
No,
we'll come back
it's
to that
very
later.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's very important to keep the flow going in writing. So if you're stuck on a certain conversation, or like something that needs to happen, absolutely leave a note to yourself and move on, right?
and make
Yeah.
it a different color. Make it a
Yes,
different
yes.
color. So when you're reading back through it, you're like, oh, why is this in red? Oh yeah, right. I forgot about that. Yeah, we're gonna put this in. I have to bring that character back in the story, or else it doesn't make
Right.
sense. Though. See, now that was the thing about going back and forth. When you
Yeah,
write a few
yeah.
chapters, you go back and forth. You never lose. You never lose where you're at. you know,
Right,
your
right.
story always flows because you go back, you read. They say, oh yeah, okay. Now from here on, we do this, and then you keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
So it takes forever, but
Right.
you you keep track of everything that's going on. And when
Yeah.
when you just keep moving on, when you say, well, I'll come back to that idea later. I'll flush that
Right,
out.
right.
And you just put something in there and say, remember John, you know.
Right. Oh my gosh. I know that there's always one character that like mysteriously disappears off the face of the earth, and you're just like, wait, they were there. Like, why they're not doing
Yeah, where
anything in
was
this
that
chapter?
guy?
I need to add them back in. Yeah.
I'm just realized that with this book I'm writing now, and it's like, yeah, I got to put the guy back in. And I got to the point where,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I can stick him in here now because he
Right. Right.
disappeared and he was an important part of the story, and he just walked away.
Walked away and didn't come back yet. No. That's too funny. Yeah. Um. What do you think is one thing that you've learned from the writing process?
Edit, edit,
Yes.
edit,
Okay.
and then get an editor.
Right. Right. That second pair of eyes can be so helpful.
Oh yes, and I found that out because I'm also a computer programmer. And one thing
Mm,
we do peer reviews in our programming
right.
because when you're a computer programmer, you write your program to work. When you get it peer reviewed, they're looking for ways to break it. Things that
Yes.
you do
Yes.
not think of that a user is going to do to your program that's going to make
Right.
the damn thing crash. and
Yeah.
And the fun thing about computer programming is when you're a programmer and you get somebody else to program, you're gonna try your hardest to break their stuff. Just like
Right.
they're trying their hardest to break yours.
Yeah, no, I actually didn't know for the longest time, but a lot of programming is like if this happens, then this is like what needs
Yeah,
to happen. And it just blows my mind that there are people like who program that just like come up with thousands of situations and scenarios where like if the user does X, Y, and Z, we have to do this. And
yeah.
just like
Who would
keeping
do that?
track of all that, right?
Yes, who would do that? And it's like I did it.
Right, right. I think it's so funny because, like, I know I've heard about programming that, like, now if there's ever a dog in a video game, like, you have to let the player be able to pet the dog. Like, that's kind of like become the standard where it used to be like, oh, I want to pet the dog, and now every video game that has a dog in it, you have to be able to pet the dog. So I really love that. Um, that's the wholesome side of people with programming,
Oh,
right? I'm sure
programming,
there's
yeah.
far more nefarious things that people try to do with
Oh yes.
programs.
And they say in writing and movies, you never kill the dog.
Right. Well, look at what happened with John Wick. What was his reaction?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
um oh my goodness, yes. Um if you could give advice or tell a new author one thing, what would you share with
Don't be in a hurry to be famous.
them?
It's
Yeah.
a long
Okay.
road. So be
Yes.
ready for the long haul because I have worked as a publisher. I worked with some new writers and everything. And everybody thinks that, I wrote one book, I should be famous. And it's like,
Right.
it doesn't happen that way. Stephen King
Right.
did not get famous on his first book. He didn't get famous until like his third or fourth or fifth book. And
Right,
then his other
right,
books became famous and everything. But the first couple of books, people hated. The publishers hated them, and so
right.
you gotta be. If you want to be a writer, you have to have thick skin
Yes,
and a long memory. You know, just
right,
keep going, and don't be discouraged. Not everybody gonna like your stuff. Not,
right.
and that's just okay.
Yeah, no, that is so true. Everyone has such different tastes. You're never going to satisfy everyone. You're never going to make everyone happy. I always tell people if they're feeling really discouraged about their writing, like they get a bad review, I'm like, look up your favorite book, your favorite author, and read their one-star reviews, and you will see very quickly that you're in very good company if you get a bad review.
Yes. I don't want
Um,
the 1-star review, but when I get them, I
yeah,
read them, and I'm like, and sometimes I'm like, all right, this person didn't understand what I was saying,
right,
or
right.
this person just doesn't like this story. Which
Right.
is
Yeah,
okay
sometimes it's just
too.
the wrong audience.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um,
That's all you
I
hear is the tail of the dog.
oh right.
He
Oh
had
my gosh.
now he had now moved underneath the desk where he is pet me, pet me. Who are
Yeah,
you
yeah.
talking to up there?
No, I swear sometimes my dog's tail is a battering ram because
I'm,
she's just
I'm gonna make
ruthless
it.
with it.
Yes, I'm gonna make him the drummer in the band. I'm gonna get the band together, and he's
Yeah.
gonna be the drummer.
Right, right. No, I think that's very good advice. Oftentimes when we see someone who's a supposed like overnight success, it's been years in the making. They've been putting years into what they're doing. They're not just starting out. They've put a
Yes,
lot of time and effort and work into the process, and then they get kind of acknowledged for
yeah.
that.
It's an
And
overnight success, 10 years in the making.
exactly, exactly. That's the saying. And I find it's very true that a lot of times we think like we should be proud and celebrate every victory, every success, getting that first book done. But like a lot of times by book three, you look at the first book and you're like, oh, I could do better, So it is definitely a work. It's a marathon, not a sprint when it comes
Yeah,
to
I
writing.
try not to go back. I don't.
Right.
Book one with book one.
Yeah,
So
because you could spend years just rewriting the first books over and
yeah,
over again.
over and
Yeah.
over again. In fact, I
Right.
just got a review, 5-star review for Killer with a Heart, which is
Yeah.
10 years old now, and I
Yes.
was like, they went through it, they loved it, they got the whole idea and everything, and I was like, oh yeah, this is great, I love this,
Right.
because they got the story, they,
Yeah.
and when someone actually gets what you wrote,
Yes.
and you
Yes.
know, and it resonated with them, and I was like, okay, that's great, you know.
Yeah, that is such a wonderful feeling. Yes, absolutely. Um, so you obviously, like I said, have a lot of stories, a lot of different types of stories. How do you make time for writing?
I usually write at night. I
Okay.
used to write from like, I would say 12 o'clock until like 2, 3 in the morning. And I used
Mhm.
to have a TV here. So I would set the TV on Cartoon Network
Okay.
and have the anime cartoons right playing, because I
Yeah.
always knew that they were only half-hour shows. So
Okay.
every half
Yeah.
every half hour another cartoon would come on, and I didn't really pay much attention to the cartoons and everything.
Right.
But I knew it, I would know when it was time to go to bed. But this time
Right.
I would write all night and then not go to bed, and then come the next morning, you can't go to work, or you do go to work, but you're very tired. So
Right. Right.
I, I,
Yeah.
I stay up to 2 o'clock in the morning anyway. I'm an insomniac, so I can
Oh,
spend my
same.
nights, writing.
Right. No, I can completely relate. I feel like my optimal prime hours is like 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. Like where that's where my brain's going. Like for most people that's 9 to, midnight. Mine is the opposite time. So I
Uh,
always I always have to ask for forgiveness because I'm like when I'm functioning during the day, I'm like imagine if you were awake at 3 a.m. That's what it feels like to me. Like, so please forgive me if I make, silly mistakes or anything like that. Cause yeah, all synapses go happens at like, 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. So
yeah,
very hard to function in the real world that way though. Yeah, can be very difficult. Um, so do you write every day then, or do you have a
no,
schedule? Okay.
no schedules, no everyday stuff.
Right.
I write when I have ideas, and once I get an idea, like once I start on a project, I usually
Mhm.
write till I finish it. So
Okay.
like
Yeah.
I'll write for 2, 3, 4 months, in. Once I get
Right.
going, it's 2 or 3, 4 months in, and then after that, I'm free of writing for a little while. I got
Right. Just
business to
waiting
take
for the
care of.
next
I got other
idea
stuff
to
I have
get
to do.
developed.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and since I do nano, and not every year, but when I do
Right.
nano, then coming out of nano, I have something to work on. So that is going to be another 2 or 3 months of, because I'll put it away for a couple of weeks and
Right.
let it simmer. Then I'll come back and I'll read through it, and then I'll start the editing and the rewrites and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
like I said,
Yeah.
it's the process of being able to, for about 3 months, 4 months, you know, of writing every day, or writing
Yeah.
every other day, every couple of days, and spending, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours, at the
Mhm.
computer. going at it, and then you know
Right.
until I get everything done, and then
Yeah.
after that I'm kind of like free again,
Right,
and
right.
try not to think about writing.
Yeah, no, I always say we have to be just as intentional with rest and recovery as we are with work and productivity, right? Because
Yeah,
we,
I,
I think as
I
a
like to get
society, we're really bad at that.
I like to get ideas out of my head too because I don't want
Yeah,
to write the same thing over and over. So if I sit
right,
there and just write every day, I have a feeling like it's all going to sound the same at some point, and that's why I
right.
switch genres, and that's why I don't write day after day after day because at some point I want to stop. When I finished Killer with Ice Eyes, I
Yes.
was going to go into my next gemstone story, which is half written. But
Mm,
after I finished the Killer series, which is 4 books, so when I finished that fourth book, Killer with Ice Eyes, it took so much out of me to write those 4 books that I just
right.
could not go into writing another book. I just could not get back into working on the Ruby Cradle, which is the second book in the
Yeah,
Gemstone series. But couldn't find I just couldn't find myself to do it. I just couldn't force
yeah,
myself to sit down and do it, which was surprising when I got to writing the next story that I'm working on now. Uh,
yeah.
it called The House of Sun and Shadow.
Okay, yeah.
So when that idea hit me, it was like, oh, this is what I'm going to write. This is what I can work.
Right,
And then,
right,
the idea came and I'm sitting there writing and everything. Because even when Nano was coming up, I had no idea of writing Nano. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do Nano. I don't have
right, right.
ideas to work it up. I don't want to do anything. And then, just like out of the blue, switch hit. And there we go.
Right, the lightning strike of
Yep.
ideas. Yes. No, I love that because like I you can get burned out very easily. And so like I said, we have to be just as intentional with rest, recovery, refilling our creative well so that we can have that next idea and be productive. So a lot of people kind of see it as wasted time, but like when you're resting, it's not a waste, right? Because we need that for
Right.
our mind, we need that for our body, and it will help us to start fresh and have the energy to like run with the next idea.
Yeah. I take it like an athlete. You don't play
Yeah.
this game every day. You don't run
No,
every
you
day.
have an off season to rest.
Right. You have
Yeah,
to rest and recuperate and all that kind of stuff before you go back out and, play again or race again or whatever.
absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They have an off season where they still, do endurance, still do the workout, but not as intense as the season is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was also gonna say, like, you're in very good company with your writing, and the genres you write because Poe also was a multi-genre writer. He invented the mystery genre.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, he
yeah,
did. And those
yeah.
are some really good books.
Right. Murder on
On the
the Rue
on the
Morgue.
movie
Yeah,
world. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Not everyone knows that because he's like so well known for his horror and his poetry. But yeah,
You hear the thumping? It's
I
doggy go
do.
crazy.
Yeah,
What?
right,
What? He wants me to take him out. You're not going out now. It's cold outside, and we have to go out later. Not
right,
not now. Here he comes. He's
right,
about to jump up on me, so I got to get back over here. So
right.
he doesn't have
Corner
room
him
to jump
in.
on me. This ain't even my dog. This is my son's dog, and I had him for like
Oh yeah,
6 years or something like that, 7 years now.
yeah.
Because my son's now in Florida, but he doesn't have room for him.
Oh,
And
gotcha. Hmm.
when he got him, he was living here, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I came home one day and he said, "Hey, we got a dog." I said, "What do you mean we got a dog? I don't want a dog. I don't have time to take care of a dog. What do you mean we have a dog?"
Right, right,
And then I seen him and I'm like, "That's not a dog. It's a beast."
right, right. And then now I'm sure you can hardly imagine life without him.
Yeah, I'm
They kind
taking
of
care of him. I'm feeding him, taking him to the doctor, all that kind of stuff.
right, right.
He's a good
They
dog.
do weasel their way into your heart. So
Yes.
I absolutely adore dogs. Um, do you have a favorite part of writing?
favorite part.
Yeah.
I guess that's when I get to the end.
Yeah.
I guess that would be the favorite part. Because the beginning is a little rough and shaky sometimes. You know, you don't really know if you're going to throw away that beginning or something like
Right.
that. You get to the middle and things are flowing pretty nice and everything, but you're always thinking, "Oh, the end is coming. The end is coming." And I got
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
really stick the landing, as they say in gymnastics.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so satisfying because you've had the end in mind the whole time, right? Because you know you're
Yep.
ending before you even start. So reaching that ending, I'm sure, is so satisfying too.
Yeah, when you get into towards the end, and you know that's coming, and this is going to be great, boy. What I'm going to knock their socks off when they read this part.
Right,
That kind of
right.
thing. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, I love that answer. Um, do you have a least favorite part of writing?
Probably the beginning.
Okay, yes, right, because you don't even know if you're gonna keep it in the end.
Yeah, because it's sometimes it's so hard to get started, and
Yeah.
your characters, and you just trying to fit them in, and who goes
Mhm.
first, and
Right.
did I actually get it? Is it exciting? You go back and you read that first chapter, you go, oh, I don't know,
Oh yeah.
oh my God, you know,
Right. Comes
this
back
is
to the
so much flowery, if and then and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, yeah, this is. Oh, I never throw anything away,
right,
unfortunately.
right.
But it's like, yeah, this isn't. Maybe I could push that to the back. Maybe we'll find something else to start the story. You, the start of the story has to be exciting. You have
Yeah.
to start at really a pivotal moment in the story.
Right,
If you want
right.
to start a story, you should find a pivotal moment in that story, and
Yeah.
that should be your beginning. When I go to
Yeah.
other people's writing and stories and everything, and I start editing them and everything, I get to like chapter 3 or 4, and then I'm like, okay, this is your beginning. All
Right.
that stuff you told me before about the ham and eggs, yeah, that had nothing to do with the story.
No,
you know,
I would agree that a lot of newer authors start too early in the story. You want to start right at the action or right before the action. That like
yeah,
precipice is kind of the sweet spot. Um, yeah, I agree with you too. I never throw anything away. I have two documents that I keep. One is called Leftovers, where I'm like, oh, I could use this in a different story or a different way. And then I have the Graveyard, which is like where ideas and sentences go to die. But
yeah,
sometimes you
yeah,
can get like a story idea or something out of it, right? Like if you're reading, if you like just randomly, I'll go through and read those documents and I'll be like, okay, I can see why this was like not working, but like it can give you an idea for another story or like a situation where like a kernel of it could work. So I always say like never delete anything. And it makes it easier to cut it from the story that it's in. Like when you're talking about filler and things that are like, oh, I really love this sentence. Like knowing I'm not deleting it permanently helps me to get rid of it in that story, so that story is better.
when I used to write things by hand and stuff like that, I used to have a
Yeah.
wallet full of like short poems and little
Right.
pieces of stories and little character things. Cause I used to sit there and watch people and write a story about somebody that I'm
Yeah.
sitting in the park or I'm sitting outside my job or you
Yeah.
stand there and you just sitting there and you see somebody like, okay, this is their life and you are writing something
Right.
about them. And so I used to have all these little scraps of paper, notes, and all this kind of stuff that was just ideas that had nothing to do with
Yeah.
anything. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
now I have it on a computer, but I,
Right. No, I
yeah,
used to write by hand as well. My first two novels I wrote by hand, but I really hate the transcription process. Like it was great to be like, oh,
yeah,
I'm going to begin editing as I'm typing it up, like, but it became so tedious that I'm just like book 3 was just all computer.
yeah,
But now
yeah.
they have yeah, now they have those like Rocketbook notebooks where you can write and then you scan the QR code and it like you can access it on your computer and I'm like, that's
I,
genius.
I was
Yeah.
thinking about that, but I'm like, will it really understand my handwriting? Because I don't understand my handwriting.
That's a valid point. That sometimes it can be like, yes, user error
Yes, I'm like,
in ineligible, illegible
yeah, because
handwriting.
sometimes when I get to a really intense part of a story,
Yes.
I'll get off the computer and I'll write it in my notebook. I got a bunch of notebooks. I'll sit there and
Right.
I'll write it out longhand because I can write much faster than I can type. I'm not really a typist.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so
No,
I'll
I
sit there and write
agree.
it. And
I
then when
agree.
I go back to type it in, I'm trying to read this stuff and I'm like,
Right.
God, I should have paid more attention in penmanship.
Right. No, I really agree with that because like I grew up in the era where we still did all the notes by hand, and so like you get very fast with your handwriting and like your little
Oh,
shortcuts.
yes.
You can write a lot faster because I can type decently fast, but like writing by hand, I can speed through things, and so I can relate to that because I'm still of that age before computers were like what you took your notes on. I all through college I was just like it would take me longer to set up my notes on my computer, let alone type them, and like the
Yeah.
lecture would be over by the time I got set up. Yeah.
Yeah, I write everything. If I'm sitting in a conference or in a lecture or anything like that,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
writing that stuff out by hand because there's no way I can type
Yeah.
it
And they
and
say it's
pay
really
attention.
great. Yeah, it's really great for memory to actually write it out. It commits it to memory much better than like typing. You're not really thinking about the words that you're typing out. You're just getting it down fast. And so there is a valuable element, I think, to writing things down by hand as well.
Yeah. I got a quill pen over there that I
Oh,
don't actually
yeah.
use. I don't use it. I seen it in the shop and I was like, ooh, it was like an 18th century, 19th
Right.
century Christmas type theme store where you
Yeah,
wanted to buy
yeah.
stuff. And I seen this quill pen set. I thought, ooh, I'm gonna buy that. It has a little ink well and everything and the quill.
Yeah. Oh,
I
that's
don't
so
use it, but I
fancy,
love
right?
it. Love it.
Yeah, you feel like such a writer with little items like
Yeah,
that where you're like, I'm a writer.
I'm a writer.
Look at
Yeah,
my
look at me.
quill
I'm an
pen. Yeah.
author. I got a quill pen.
Yeah, it makes you feel fancy and yeah, proper. I love that. What would you say influences your writing?
Oh, everything.
Yeah.
Everything from what I see on the news, things I hear, you know, just anything that happens will sometime make it into a story, or
Yeah,
will
yeah.
influence a story. The Killer series was influenced by where I grew up at. I grew up in the South Bronx, and
Mhm.
I moved into the Mid Bronx, so I knew a bunch of people within the mafia, and gangs and all that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
that whole storyline is just built from the '70s and '80s when I grew up in New York, and
Yeah.
not not true stories, but a lot of the people are conglomerates of different people, and that
Right.
kind of. So yeah,
Yeah.
but science fiction stories. You read something in the news that someone came up with an idea, or you see something, and you say, "Well, what happens if this was, if this went this way?
Right.
What if that idea actually worked? Where
Right.
would we be
Right.
in 50 years if this idea actually gets off the ground? You know,
Yeah.
and so, and any type of thing you hear, like I said, I used to write about people I just see walking on the street or people I see on the train, especially when I was in New York and have to take the
Yeah.
train up and down. You sit there and you write a thing, and that guy's going to be a character. I wrote
Mhm.
one person in my Killer series because he was in my yoga class and he had a great name. And I
Yeah,
told
yeah.
him, "You got a great name. I'm going to make you a character in the story." And he was like, "Really? You're a writer?" I said, "Yes." I said, "And you're not going to die."
Yay! Yes, benefit.
Yeah, that's a good thing. You're not going to die.
Right, right. No, I always think that like the true gift of writers is being inspired by everything, right? Being able to see people on the street and like get story ideas and character ideas from everything around you. I think that's the true gift of a writer. Um, and so I really love that answer. Yeah. Um, do you ever have writer's block and how do you kind of overcome that?
Uh, I don't really have writer's block
Mhm.
because I'll just change if I can't. If I'm in the story and I really don't know where I'm going with this story, then I'll get out the story and do something else.
Yeah,
I'll come back
right.
to it when when it works itself out. I'll go cut the
Yeah.
grass, something like that. And if, like I said before, the Ruby Cradle, I really
Mhm.
couldn't get back into it. So I
Right.
started doing more research in the time period, researching Castle. But then I found out it wasn't that I couldn't get into the story, or you know,
Mhm.
I just didn't want to write anymore at that point. I just
Right.
came out of
Right.
this other series, and I just really didn't want to write. So I went
Yeah.
like, okay, well, I'll do some more research and everything about my dragons and castles and stuff,
Mhm.
and I'll just build up all this information that I can then go back when I'm ready to hit that
Right.
story, which was supposed to be this year, but it's looked like, well, it will be 2024 now, because after I
Yeah.
finish the story, I'm going to go back to the Ruby Cradle and get this thing.
Yeah.
It's been 3, 4 years. The bad thing about Facebook, it
Right.
reminds you how much time has passed.
Right.
When
Darn
you say you're going
memories.
to do
Yes.
something, that memory pops up, and God, it was 3 years ago I put that out, and I haven't
Right.
done it yet.
Right. Oh, I know. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to see my memories, Facebook. Sometimes I say that out loud. Yes. Um, what has been your most significant writing victory so far?
The Killer series.
Yeah.
That was 4 books. Took over 10 years to write them.
Yeah.
It took over 20 or 30 years to actually get the story, because I had the whole story for all 4 books laid down in my head.
Right.
But it took me 10 years to actually write them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
like I said, it's based on things from the 70s and 80s,
Mm.
and not just things that happened to me, but things that was happening at the time. You
Yes.
know, the commission trials, the war on drugs, uh,
Mm.
the war in Afghanistan,
Mm-hmm.
when the Russians were in Afghanistan, not us, uh,
Right. Right.
with the Mujahideen. All that stuff is all encompassed in that story, because it's about
Yeah.
the 70s and 80s, and this
Yeah.
crime family, and these 2 guys who come up become international criminals,
Mm-hmm.
and all the different things that you wouldn't think of in like the mafia or gangs and
Right.
stuff. You wouldn't think of these guys. This guy's working for the government. You know, he he's
Right.
he's a criminal. What? How would he be work? The government went to go get him because
Right.
they needed
Right.
somebody who was good at what he did. So they go
Right.
to him. He's an international arms dealer at some point, because after
Right.
all, he's a criminal.
Yeah.
you know,
Right. Right. Leopard can't change his spots. Right.
yeah.
So.
But he's good at what he does, and so he
Right.
was developing arms, and that's another reason why the government wanted him, because he was coming up with these ideas on um,
Mhm.
smart bombs, that kind of
Yeah.
thing, cruise missiles, and
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
thing about these things is, people don't realize when they come up with this stealth plane, how
Right.
many years went into developing this thing. You hear
Yeah.
about something now, and you're like, oh wow, that's something cool. They just developed it. Yeah, they were working on that thing for like 20 years.
Right.
Came out now, but
Yeah.
somebody had the idea 20 years ago, and it
Yes.
took them
Yes.
that long to develop it. And they may even had it running for a few years before they actually took the took the cover off and said, okay, yeah, we
Right.
got this. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
we got this,
That
because now we
overnight
want you
success
to
thing
know.
again, all
Yeah,
over again. Yes.
yeah. But now we want you to know we have this.
Right. Right. Um. What writing advice, if any, that do you hate? Like, really just doesn't gel or make any sense to you?
Write every day.
Yes.
That's the worst advice anybody could ever. Oh, if you're a writer, you need to write every day.
Right.
No, no, you should write when you have an idea. You should
Mm-hmm.
write when you have something to say. You know,
Right.
if you just sit down, because some people say, well, write every day, even if you throw it away later. No, you're just wasting your time then, Paper costs money. I
Right.
can't just sit there and, all right, it's on a computer now, so I'm not wasting the paper, but,
But you got memory space
yeah,
issues,
memory
right?
space, and, I can be doing something else. I can be cutting my grass if I don't have nothing to say.
Right, right,
So,
right.
yeah, so that idea, you have to write every day if you want to be a writer. Bad advice.
Well, and I mean, there's just so many different factors that go into like people's brains. Some people's brains just like don't work that way. Like my brain doesn't work that way. I could never write every day, even if I like tried my best
That's
to
right.
be like
Yeah.
my most aspirational self.
Yep. That's why I said I would
My
love
brain just
to
yeah.
be like Stephen King, be able to come to the computer, sit down, and say four
Yeah.
hours a day I'm just going to write. Or what did he
I
say?
would
If you write
love
100,
to. Yeah.
yeah, did you write 100 words a day or 100 pages a day or something like that? He has some
Yeah, yeah.
crazy number. If you did this every day for a year, you have a novel. Yeah, of course you would.
Right.
But
Right.
you know,
Right. Yeah, that's
something
one of
like
the reasons
that.
why we do this show and have everyone talk about their writing process and what works and doesn't work for them because like I always say like there's as many different ways to write as there are writers writing. So like,
Yep.
experiment, try on new things, but like don't ever let anyone tell you like this is how you have to do it because there's
Yeah,
so
like
many
I said,
different
that's
ways
a
to
bad
be there.
idea for me. It might work for
Yeah.
you. Writing every day
Right,
might work
right.
for you. It might be a good advice, but for me, that's a bad advice. I
Yeah,
can't do that.
I relate. I relate very much. Well, we do want to give you the opportunity to let people know where they can find out more about you, your books, your publishing company online. So if you go ahead and share website, socials, anything like that.
All right. So first and foremost, you want to find me at rockhillpublishing.com. It's all one word. Uh, you'll find my books and you'll find the other people I publish. I
Hmm.
publish sci-fi, fantasy, romance, uh, adult crime novels, adult novels, women's literature. So you'll find a wide variety of people at my Rock Hill Publishing
Yeah.
website. And then you can find me on Facebook at JL Hill or, well, look for JL Hill. You'll find me there. I'm on Amazon or
Hmm.
any place where you can think of, I'll probably be there somewhere.
Right. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I've had such a fun conversation with you, so I want to say thank you for joining us. I know you're probably super busy being a publisher and an author, so thank you for spending an hour with me. I really appreciate that.
Oh, I appreciate it. It was fun. I love this. You're such
Yeah,
a great
yes.
host.
Oh, thank you. You're too kind. Yeah, thank you for joining us. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's listening along at home. You can catch our next episode next Friday when it releases. And remember, there's more than one way up a mountain. If you're interested in being a guest on our show, you can find us on social media at The Tell Not Show, or you can email us at thetellnotshow@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach and can be found at hijingsrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to four, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks and see you next time.